have is vegetation coming up on the earth. So we're going to have grasses, all kinds of grasses, the herbs, and trees of all kinds, and fruit. And specifically, what zeroes in here is fruit trees, fruiting trees. And so there's all kinds of vegetation that we see that's appearing on the earth. It's coming forth from the ground. God is making this so, okay? But it seems, if you if you read this, and you've probably read this a bunch of times in your life, and you said, well, yeah, this is day 3, this is where God made the earth, and he made all the vegetation, the grass, and all the trees, and he made that to appear. But if you kind of zero in on the list, it seems to be a kind of a specific list. It's a specific list because this is mostly talking about stuff that's actually going to be food. It's grasses, it's herbs, and it's fruiting trees. Notice it doesn't really talk about all kinds of other trees. There's other trees that aren't necessarily fruit trees, but here we're specifically told that it's fruit trees. So as I look at this, it seems to me that God is showing us that what's happening is, on day 3, he's making the land come up, he's making the land appear, and he's making possible what is going to be the food supply, the early food supply on the earth. The grasses and trees are going to be food for animals, and these herbs and fruiting trees will produce food for all of the animal kingdom and mankind. So we see the earth, the dry land being brought up, and then all the grass, the vegetation, the fruiting trees brought forth from the earth specifically for the purpose of food. Why? Why is it being presented to us like this? Because food is essential for life. And remember, when you look at the week of creation, what is the goal? What is the end goal? The end goal is that he's bringing the earth from a state of formlessness to a state where it's going to be filled with the land's going to be filled with creeping creatures, and the rivers and the waters are going to teem with all kinds of creatures, and then the land is going to have animals, and ultimately the crowning piece of creation week, which is mankind, made in the image of God. And so we've got all this vegetation coming forth, this food. Why? Because food is essential for life. How many of you like food? Amen? Amen? Remember what I told you. Remember what I told you. Everything that's laid down in Genesis is the foundation for everything that's going on in your life. And how many ate today? Amen? See, so I was right. I was right when I told you that, because that's what we're talking about right now. Now, how many like Chick-fil-A? How many are Chick-fil-A fans? Yeah, you can't get enough of the chick. We got one up here on Wickham Road at 95, and they can't build drive-thrus fast enough to service all the people. I think one day we're going to ride by there, and they're going to have it's going to be a double-decker drive-thru, because they can't go out unless they move the Holiday Inn out or whatever. I don't know what they're going to do. But the founder of Chick-fil-A is Truett, Cathy. And if you go to a Chick-fil-A and you sit down in a Chick-fil-A, and I remember when I first saw this, because I was sitting in a Chick-fil-A eating my chicken sandwich with the pickle and the whole thing, and the waffle fries and the Polynesian sauce and the whole 9 yards, amen? The whole bit. I looked up on the wall and I saw a quote from Truett, Cathy. And it says this, you'll see it up on the screen. Food is essential to life. Therefore, make it good. Amen? Food is essential to life. Therefore, make it good. And I want to just tell you tonight, I wholeheartedly endorse this statement. Amen? Yeah. Food is essential to life. Therefore, make it good. I agree. I love food, and food should be good. Now, how do you make food good? Well, there's this little thing called the culinary arts, right? The culinary arts. Guys and gals go off to these institutes where they learn how to do all this fancy stuff with food. And there's all kinds of incredible, fancy stuff that you can do with food. And it's not just pretty to the eye, it tastes awesome. It tastes great. And there's all kinds of things that you can do with food to make it great. There's all kinds of ways that you can prepare food. You can take a simple item and you can fix it up just many different ways. You say, Charles, what are you talking about? Well, just think about Bubba. Bubba from Forrest Gump, he told us all the ways that you could do shrimp, right? So just with shrimp, there's a tremendous amount of things that you can do with food. Culinary arts, it's amazing. And in preparing food, it was discovered that the use of spices and herbs became instrumental in making food great, making food taste great. Spice. So you have food, and then not only did God give us food, but he gave us spice. Amen? Now, I did a little research on spices, and I have to admit, before this message and before preparing for it, I had never really done any actual study on spices. Amen? No, there was no reason that has presented itself before this week for me to do a study on spices. But God created herbs on day 3. And so I said, okay, God, this is what your word says, so I'm going to dive in here and look at what this is all about. A spice is a seed, a fruit, a root, a bark, and other plant substance primarily used for flavoring, coloring, or preserving food. Spices are distinguished from herbs, which are the leaves. So you have the bark and the root and all that, and so they ground up the spice, and then you have the herbs. So you have spices and herbs, and they're all used in this culinary process to make food great, right? So when I was talking about spices and herbs, I was thinking, okay, I'm one of these inquisitive people. So I'm talking about spices. I want to know how many spices there are. How many spices are there? Does anybody know? Anybody have an idea? You want to take a stab at it? Anybody want to just take a... 100,000. He shot the moon on that one, yeah. To the best that I could come up with from my research, there are about 350 types of spices. About 350. And just off by a couple 100,000. Now, listen. Another interesting fact about spices is that 75 to 80% of the spices that you probably have in your kitchen right now, 75 to 80% came from India. India is like kind of the spice capital of the world. I mean, they love their spices down there. Have you had Indian food? Yeah. Some curry chicken. You get some curry chicken going and you get this stuff going. I mean, it is like good. Spices bring out the flavor of food. And there's a saying about life. Variety is the spice of life. And spice is the variety of food. Amen? So, God gave us spice. He gave us what brought about the food, and he took care to give us everything else that was going to make it great. And I'm, for one, you got to take a little advice from Emeril Lagasse, right? Amen? You got to take a little advice from Emeril Lagasse. You got to throw a little spice in there, and you got to just bam, right? And kick it up a notch, right? And I think it's a godly thing. I think it's a godly thing because right here, he made spices, and he made herbs, and he brought forth the food on the face of the earth. Amen? Amen. Food is essential, and so you might as well make it good. Tov, good.